So did you hunt the kind of like the same herd or the same elk the whole time?
Yeah, for the most
Oh,
part. Now
interesting. It
there was some different. I mean, there was. I shouldn't say the whole time. There was like a couple of different like smaller herds that I had hunted a few of the days, but for the most part, I was on the same herd that just seemed to continue to grow as September went on.
Oh, well, in that case, it's pretty good. I would say, the biggest thing about elk hunting, and I think I made a statement earlier about you kind of got to bump elk to find elk, in that most people they walk around, they're like blowing their little cow call or like around every tree, and I bet they cover, like, just for reference, I bet the average hunter who comes out west and hunts probably covers a tenth, maybe even less of the ground that I'm going to cover if I was going into the same situation in a new ground, new area. Like I think it would just blow people's mind how much ground someone will cover to like, okay, I need to find elk. And I'm not even talking about one herd of elk. Like sometimes like I'll have elk and I don't even care about, I'm like, okay, back pocket that, let's go. Like we're just finding more and more and more. I want, I want to know everything, right? I want to know how many herds. I want to find at least 2 or 3 opportunities because like I think the average guy, and I'll pick on you just because it's easy and you can take it. But like say you come out, you're like, ooh, we got elk to hunt. You're like, cool, let's hunt it the next day. And you go in there and you screw it up. And then you're like, oh man, tomorrow, right? Like I'm like, no, that's not good enough. I want to screw it up 3 times in one day. I want 3 different herds that day to screw up and have, opportunities at bats at. And so like now, like you just went from like, let's just say a 10-day hunt. And if you're lucky, you get 10 opportunities. And like, let's call a spade a spade. It's probably going to be like, it took you 3 days to find them. And there's another day where you missed out in there. So now you're down to like 6 opportunities. Like that's 6 at bats. Now versus let's just say I go super hard and I get 3 opportunities per day. That's 30 opportunities. So my success rate was 1 in 30 and yours is, 0 out of 6, right? So it's not that I was such a good hunter that I capitalized on every opportunity. It's that I had more at bats, right? And so then you can extrapolate this out where it's like most good hunters won't tell you like, they'll tell you, I'm not that great. I just spend a lot of time doing it. So now when you extrapolate that back to like 20 days, like the average dude goes on a 7-day hunt and he gets, 4 opportunities. I screwed up technically way more times than you did. It's just that I had a ton more opportunities and more time. And so like, it's not that I'm a great hunter. It's just that I batted 1 in 100 and you batted, 0 out of 6. They're not even comparable. We're comparing apples and oranges. So when you start to look at it like that, you're like, okay, I need to find elk. Like, so when I say like, I'm going to Idaho, I'm going to go to this new unit, man, I like the first day, 2, 3, however many I have to scout, like I am flat covering ground, like nobody's business. Right. And that changes a little bit. Again, going back to like, is it opening week? Or are we like, man, the elk aren't talking, they aren't moving. I pretty much have to check tracks and water holes. Okay. Like we're going to do 20 miles today and we're going to check every water hole and we're going to look for tracks, right? Like it's just, we're going hard. I don't care if we bump elk. I don't care if we don't even see an elk. I need to find tracks. And I'm not saying like, oh, I got to this water tank and I found tracks. Let's sit and hunt it. I'm like, nope, next. Nope, next. Because I'm trying to, the same way you're trying to put the whole picture together, like I'm trying to put the whole picture together. I'm like, oh, cool. Maybe there's 5 elk here, but just over there was 200. Like, which one do you want to hunt, right? It's going to be way easier to hunt the 200 than the 5, right? I need to know all these things. And if I only found the 5 and then I tried to hunt the 5 for the next 3 days, like, there's a good chance maybe like I'm hunting super quiet elk that aren't moving. Like there's a good chance we burn up 5 days easily. Like that can happen very quickly. And we just never really get an opportunity. Whereas like if we would have just kept going and leave elk to find elk, maybe we figure out, something else. And maybe those 5 end up going to the 200. Like these are pieces of the puzzle that I need to know, because so many times you're like, I see people like, oh, I got this little herd, and like all of a sudden the herd disappears. Well, it's like, well, where did they go? Why did they go there? All these things. So I'm like, when I think about, I actually separate in my mind finding elk and hunting elk. And there's a big distinction because when I'm in finding elk mode, I'm literally just like, I'm covering ground as fast as I can. I'm not even trying to hunt those elk. I'm just trying to find out where they are. I'm trying to get the bigger picture, right? And I think so many people come out and they want to just like hunt. They're walking this little timber patch. They e-scouted this like north face and they walk in there and blow their cow call. and they think that elk are on every single north face, and it's just not the case, right? And so like, I need to just put this whole picture together before I start hunting. And so like, when I think about that, it's very different than like trying to hunt them and find them at the same time.
You know, I don't know if I've ever heard it put that way, as far as like hearing it, but it makes so much sense because, again, and I'm going to keep tying it back to whitetail hunting, but the way that I go about, like when I'm scouting areas, and I probably should have brought this up at the beginning part, but I always try to have 3 to 5 areas that I have deer located in before hunting season really starts. And I know that's not always the case for going out, but even if I go on an out of state trip, like I'm trying to find where they're at and I'm covering ground and doing that versus just, slowly creeping through an area at the very beginning. You got to find where they're at before you can even, go to do that, and having those backup plans, because whether it's people come in or busting, which ended up happening to me on that elk hunt in Montana, where I had this herd to myself for the first 7-8 days. And then once that heat dissipated and you started getting the second week of September, all of a sudden other people started moving in, and it was just an incredible amount of pressure of people that don't like people from Pennsylvania. So they didn't care, when I had them tell me that, they didn't really care. They're just trying to figure out how I found it. And in that case, like if I would have had multiple herds, had located in these different spots, I could have bounced around and not had, been so invested in that spot. And it's like, getting married to a place. Like I talk about it all the time with whitetails too. Find this really good spot and you build this up in your mind. Like, this is the spot I need to be to. And then when it's not exactly that come season, it's hard for you to transition out and go do something different because you're so married to this spot. And I see a lot of guys get into that rut, including myself sometimes. And so I think you answered this question, but just to make it clear. So even if you were showing up, say you were showing up September 8th, season's already open, you would still spend that time, the first day or two, of just covering ground, and you'd even leave elk that you would find to go find more.
Yeah. And, this happened to be this year. I think I showed up the 5th or something like that. And, I'm really just covering ground and finding multiple elk. And it's not like I'm just not going to hunt those elk. Maybe I hunt them in the morning, but a lot of times, you get 20 minutes and that's about it. And so midday I can be looking for more elk. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They want to go back, take a nap. Maybe in the evening, like it's just, if they're not going to get up, or maybe I'm just going to scoot back and get a bigger picture, and start working my way back out to find the next. Cause a lot of times, like, it's not like I absolutely will just drive across the mountain to see if there's something there. Like, I'm trying to be efficient with it. So I'm trying to just like scoot back and get a little bit bigger picture. And cause a lot of times, you get into a herd of elk and there's probably another one nearby. It's not, completely isolated. And so like, I'm dabbling in the search and hunt, right? Like maybe I hunt that next morning, but then I'm back to search, or like maybe I skip an evening and I just do search, and I'm not going to hunt these elk, right? I'm like, man, I know what they're going to do in the morning. Like, let's go find more elk, right? Cause I need that. I need to know where other things are. And what's happened to me over the years, and I learned this really well in Idaho, is that, maybe over here, nothing's talking. And, you get the classic, like, oh, the elk weren't talking this year. I have been in places where the elk weren't talking that day, that week, that anything. But around the other side of the mountain, elk are going nuts.